I wanted, as we've been thinking about sort of a medical response to addiction, I wanted to explore with them this whole idea of medical marijuana use and licensing it. Is that a valid thing, or is it just a softening of the stand?
From a medical point of view, right now, I said to you that since 2010, rehab has had its budgets cut and cut. And in the community, a lot of drug addicts end up on other medications. So they get scripts. Rather than dealing with the issue, we're handing out drugs anyway. I can't see why cannabis, the oils, if it is absolutely helps a medical situation, that would be monitored by a doctor and helping a situation. Doesn't necessarily mean someone becomes an addict. And there's a fine line, but it comes back to clear medical support for every individual, because every individual is different. But it's wrong to feel that this is actually that alien to what we're doing at the moment in terms of writing people prescriptions.
What do you think, Ciarán? Because it has been a big part of the let's legalise cannabis argument, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of smoke and noise and around this issue and not a lot of reality, really. Use the word cannabis. Well, cannabis has got something like 10,000 or more compounds that make up your typical cannabis. Now, within those 10,000, we already know that there are certain compounds which are good and useful, and it is those get extracted and they go through clinical trials and they get used in an appropriate fashion. Brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. In the same way that those, drugs come from all sorts of sources, and are used and are tested and are rolled out in an appropriate and in a controlled fashion. So that's great. And the more of that, the better. That is very different, though, to the way the debate is being framed, which, if I put it reasonably crudely, it's almost equated to if I go down to my local dealer and I get some cannabis and I smoke that for medicinal purposes, then I should be able to do that. And it's been so. I mean, there was a US campaigner, pro-drugs campaigner, a guy called Keith Stroop. He called this whole area, he called it the red herring on the road to legalization, because he knew and knows that if you sort of get this acceptance of that kind of thinking, then you're that much closer to greater legalization. So let's not confuse the two things, I would say. There are medical compounds which can and should be used and go through the proper licensing and all that sort of approach. And then there is cannabis, the kind of cannabis you get on the street, which, by the way, is much, much stronger now than perhaps people think of it as perhaps something they've associated with the 60s and the 70s, maybe. Now, the cannabis oil stuff is a different issue again. I mean, that is, I think someone might have said that if you claim everything, you can sell anything. And cannabis products seem to be being dished out for everything right, left and centre. It seems a bit of a snake oil, really. The Food Standards Agency has called it a novel food. So that means it's not regulated. They've also told pregnant and breastfeeding women that CBD products should be avoided. So there's the CBD bit, and then there's the THC element, which most of the time has been extracted. The THC is the psychoactive element. But let's not be naive about this. The thing with cannabis oil is it's become big business. So there are a lot of vested interests in people making money and selling this stuff, because people will say that they take a couple of drops and it's fine. And now there's starting to be greater testing, and some of their claims are being shown up to be false. So we need to kind of understand the different elements of what's really being talked about when we talk about cannabis oil and medical cannabis and so on and so forth. In short, there are some good things. There's some good compounds. Let's use them. Let's license them, and let's put them in, as we have done for drugs for decades. Let's not confuse that with legalizing cannabis or having a sort of a wider sense of what medicinal cannabis is. And certainly let's not confuse it with some of the CBD products that are kicking around.
So what can we do, given that it is a complex subject, given that people's lives are being devastated, given that there is a calling on us as people of faith to recognize and to value our neighbor and to care about them, and so accepting all of that, what can we do to actually make a difference in this, which sometimes feels almost ubiquitous problem in our society at the moment? What can we do to improve things?
Okay, well, first of all, let's not be fooled by the whole legalization argument. It's easy to think about. People will put forward lots of good reasons. People who will be less balanced than Penny's been today will talk about will want to remove the criminal element to it completely and have a much more of a free fall. So let's not be fooled by that. We've got to recognise as Christians that drugs have a damaging effect on the individual, on the family of that individual, on our country. And it is not an exaggeration to say globally, because the cocaine-fueled nightclubber who's buying his hit on a Friday night or what have you is having a real effect on lives on the other side of the world in Latin America. And we cannot afford to have this out of sight, out of mind kind of attitude, just because it is not affecting you and your family at this moment in time. Not a reason not to engage with this as an issue. We have to recognise that people's lives are being ruined. If we believe in a gospel of transformation, then we want to reach people with that gospel. We don't want to have to, if you like, fight our way through the fog of drug addiction to make people aware of the good news of Jesus Christ. And I'll come back to what I said right near the start, Paul, is we have a Christian duty to love our neighbour in the widest sense. So that means taking opportunities to be active in ensuring that drug laws are firmly applied, that if there's ways that we can get involved with helping people, and if our churches are engaged with that, probably not many people who can find themselves in the situation of having the kind of direct role that Penny's got. But these are things that Christians need to take seriously, and perhaps scratch below some of the headlines of harm reduction and decriminalisation, which make the headlines on a daily basis. Obviously, we want to see harm reduced, but I think Penny talked about it earlier on. We don't want to see people kind of parked on being reliant upon a prescription, being parked on methadone or what have you, and somehow that makes us feel better because they're not taking heroin. We can't be naive about this as Christians or as non-Christians. We've got to recognise the damage that is being done, and things that are going to help and things that are going to hinder.
And what about you, Penny? Given that you work every day with people who live with the impact of addiction, what would you have? What would you like to see the church say and do in our communities, in our society, to improve things?
I think I'd echo a lot of things that have just been said, that it's about that human kindness. You know, a lot of people fall into addiction because of trauma, as we've discussed, but also loneliness, homelessness. Reaching out to those people and giving them a second chance is really important. from the sort of sector point of view, Dame Carol Black has just done a review for government that's going to Parliament in February, and we are very, very hopeful that we can reverse the funding decline for this sector because of the importance in society to make a difference and to change this downward trend of more people resorting to drugs and alcohol because they're not getting the support in their lives for whatever reason, whether they're homeless, they've had trauma or whatever. The government announced 80 million, which is nowhere near enough. They're talking about 900 million for the next 3 years, but we are hopeful that at least that can turn around because, as mentioned, just putting someone on a prescription doesn't make the problem go away. That doesn't make it right. Yes, the drug gangs aren't getting their money, and maybe that's better for society, but it's still not fixing the problem. You know, the work that we do and the other 59 rehabs in the country is we fix people properly. And it's a far better way for society to be a better place for us to do that work, but we need funding to do it. And charities at the moment with the pandemic, you know, please support local charities. We fill the gaps that the government have walked away from in the last 15 years. We fill those social gaps that people have been falling through, and charities pick up the pieces. So yeah, whichever charity you can support that supports social kindness, then that's what I'd ask for.
Life Issues on UCB1.
And that was Penny Williams, who is the CEO of the Kenwood Trust, my guest this week for our Life Issues, talking about addiction and the, in inverted commas, war on drugs. My guest, along with Ciarán Kelly, who is from the Christian Institute.